In the chaotic year of 238 AD, a year so turbulent it would be known as the Year of the Six Emperors, the Roman Empire was teetering on the brink of collapse. The man on the throne, Maximinus Thrax, was a giant of a man, a former shepherd who had risen through the military ranks. But his rule was one of brutal extortion and endless warfare. The people were suffering, the Senate was powerless, and the provinces were seething with resentment. It was a powder keg, waiting for a spark. And that spark was about to be lit in the sun-drenched province of Africa. Our story begins not with emperors, but with tax collectors. Maximinus, desperate for funds to pay his legions, had dispatched his procurator to Africa with one simple command: squeeze every last denarius out of the wealthy landowners. These were men of influence, men used to a life of luxury, and they were not about to see their fortunes confiscated. They hatched a desperate plan. They gathered a mob of their farm tenants, armed them with whatever they could find, and stormed the city of Thysdrus, known today as El Gem. They found the procurator, and in a flash of violence, the emperor's will was met with bloody rebellion. The landowners knew what they had done. They had committed treason. There was no going back. Their only hope for survival was to overthrow the emperor himself. But who could lead them? Who had the authority, the gravitas, to challenge a man like Maximinus? Their eyes turned to one man, the provincial governor, Marcus Antonius Gordianus Sempronianus Romanus, a man we know as Gordian. Gordian was 80 years old. He was a relic of a bygone era, a man of immense wealth, intellectual pursuits, and a distinguished senatorial career that stretched back decades. He had served as consul, governed provinces, and was respected by all. He was enjoying a peaceful, semi-retired post in Africa, a final, quiet chapter to a long and illustrious life. He wanted nothing to do with this rebellion. When the young nobles approached him, offering him the imperial purple, he refused. He was too old, he said. The burden was too great. But the rebels were persistent. They drew their swords, not to threaten him, but to show their desperation. It was either him or death for all of them. They hailed him as Augustus. Reluctantly, Gordian accepted. But he made one condition. He would not rule alone. He insisted that his son, who shared his name and served as his second-in-command, be elevated alongside him as co-emperor. And so, in an instant, the Roman world had two new emperors, Gordian I and his son, Gordian II. The news spread like wildfire. A delegation was sent to Rome, carrying the heads of Maximinus's officials as proof of their success. They arrived during a theatrical performance, brandishing the news of their new emperors. The city prefect, loyal to Maximinus, tried to arrest them but was cut down by the mob. Rome erupted in joyous celebration. Statues of Maximinus were toppled, his supporters hunted down and killed. The Senate, sensing the shift in power, eagerly embraced the Gordians. They officially declared Maximinus a public enemy and confirmed the two Gordians as the legitimate rulers of the Roman Empire. For a moment, it seemed like the nightmare was over. A new, brighter dawn was breaking. Gordian I, from his new capital in Carthage, began his reign. He was a traditionalist, a man of the Senate. He issued coins promising the restoration of senatorial authority and the security of the age. He represented a return to the old ways, a stark contrast to the military brute, Maximinus Thrax. His son, Gordian II, at 46 years old, was a popular man, known for his vast library and his charismatic, if somewhat indulgent, lifestyle. The father and son duo represented stability, intellect, and a link to a more peaceful past. They were everything Rome seemed to crave. But an empire is not won with promises and popular support alone. It is held with legions. And while the Gordians had the Senate, the people of Rome, and the province of Africa, Maximinus had the hardened armies of the Rhine and Danube frontiers. Upon hearing of the rebellion, Maximinus, who was campaigning against Germanic tribes, was enraged. He turned his entire military machine south, marching his battle-tested legions towards Italy. The race against time had begun. The Gordians' immediate problem, however, was much closer to home. The neighboring province of Numidia was governed by a man named Capelianus. He was a staunch supporter of Maximinus and, more importantly, a bitter personal enemy of Gordian the Thrax, who had once tried to have him replaced. Capelianus commanded the 3rd Augusta Legion, the only professional Roman army in the region. He saw his chance for revenge and to prove his loyalty to Maximinus. He gathered his forces and marched on Carthage. The defense of Carthage fell to Gordian II. But what could he do? He had no army to speak of. His forces consisted of a hastily assembled militia, a passionate but untrained mob of city dwellers and farmhands. It was a citizen's army against a professional legion. The battle was a foregone conclusion. Just outside the city walls, the two forces met. The Numidian legionaries, disciplined and experienced, cut through the Gordian militia with brutal efficiency. The battle quickly turned into a massacre. Among the thousands slain was the emperor himself, Gordian II. His body was never recovered. Back in Carthage, the elder Gordian awaited news of the battle. When a messenger arrived and told him of the slaughter and the death of his beloved son, the 80-year-old emperor was overcome with despair. His hope, his dynasty, his very reason for accepting the purple was gone. The brief, hopeful dream had turned into a horrific nightmare. Seeing no way out, knowing Capelianus's army would soon be at the city gates, Gordian the Ring took his own belt and ended his life. The reign of the two Gordians was over. It had lasted a mere 21 days, 3 weeks of exhilarating hope followed by devastating tragedy. From the moment they were proclaimed emperors to their tragic deaths, their rule was a whirlwind of chaos and crisis. They were the right men at the wrong time, symbols of a dying ideal, swallowed by the brutal realities of a military-dominated empire. But the story doesn't end there. When the news of the Gordians' deaths reached Rome, the Senate did not simply surrender to Maximinus. The rebellion the Gordians had started had taken on a life of its own. The senators knew Maximinus would show them no mercy. In a desperate act of self-preservation, they elected 2 of their own, Pupienus and Balbinus, as co-emperors to continue the fight. And to appease the Roman people who had loved the Gordians, they appointed Gordian III's young grandson, a 13-year-old boy also named Gordian, as Caesar, the heir apparent. This boy would become Gordian III. The fire that the Gordians had ignited now raged across the empire. The stage was set for an even bloodier confrontation. A civil war that would see Maximinus Thrax besiege the city of Aquileia, only to be assassinated by his own disillusioned soldiers. The double emperors Pupienus and Balbinus would rule for a mere 99 days before being murdered by the Praetorian Guard. Out of the ashes of this horrific year, the young Gordian III would emerge as the sole emperor, a boy ruler carrying the legacy of his father and grandfather. The tragic 3-week reign of Gordian the Firm and Gordian II was not just a footnote in history. It was the catalyst that shattered the rule of Maximinus Thrax and plunged the empire into one of its most chaotic periods, ultimately paving the way for a new, albeit temporary, stability under a new Gordian dynasty. Their short, dramatic reign is a powerful reminder of how quickly fortunes can turn, and how even the noblest intentions can be crushed by the unyielding machinery of power and betrayal in the Roman Empire. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to ancient Rome. If you found this story of ambition, rebellion, and tragedy as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let me know in the comments which historical event you'd like to explore next. Until then, stay curious.